So, good evening, everybody, and thank you to everybody for joining us on another Portugalist webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about utilities. We'll be covering internet within that as well. So, we're talking about getting connected to things like electricity and gas, getting your home internet sorted. I think we might also touch on water and perhaps mobile phone or cell phone plans as well, very briefly. And this possibly isn't the most exciting topic we've ever covered, but I think it's something that we all have to deal with when we move to a new place. And it's something that you want to get right, especially with things like internet and mobile phones, where you are signing up for a contract. I think it's also something that people are a little bit nervous about trying to organize themselves. Nobody wants to move to a country where they don't necessarily speak the language yet and have to try and phone up the electricity company or the water company and try and get connected. So, very, very happy to be in the capable hands once again of Fernando Mendes, who's going to be talking us through everything that he does. Which is helping people get connected to these various services. Fernando's been on a Portugalist webinar before where we've talked about internet and mobile phones, and that is definitely worth a listen if that's something that you're interested in. But we're going to cover a lot of that ground again today. So we have people starting to join us, and I know people are coming from all over the world. People have already sent in questions, and you are more than welcome to ask other questions now. There is a Q&A tab in your Zoom, and that is definitely the best place to ask them. There's also a chat area, I believe, but definitely is a little bit easier for us to keep on top of them if they're in the Q&A section. With that in mind, I'm just going to hand it over to Fernando and ask him just to give a brief introduction about himself, and then we'll get started going through each of the individual topics.
Hi, James. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of our participants here in this webinar. Once again, a massive thank you to James. He's a fantastic guy. I can repeat it on forever and ever because he's really good. He's been helping a lot of the expats. He's really good doing these webinars, organizing it. Obviously, it's a pleasure on my end being available, trying to help your clients. As he said, my name is Fernando Mendes. I speak English, as you can see. I was born here. I grew up in Canada, so that's why you're in good hands. Normally, I communicate every day in English. That's the way I like to work with clients. And myself, basically, so I understand my role, I am a salesman. So I receive sales commissions off the utility companies. So my services are always free, nothing is charged. And obviously, if you have any questions, put it on the questions and answer sections. As James said, it's easier, and then he can help me out, and I'll try and answer the questions as we go along. I'm sure James, as has done in previous webinars, he will then put this whole webinar on a YouTube link, which people can share and see
Absolutely.
afterwards. I mean, we did our last webinar about 7 or 8 months ago. I was telling James the other day, even last month, I still had one client saying, Fernando, I looked at the YouTube video again about the webinar. So it's always good, even if you can't see the whole webinar now, or a lot of information, it's true, then you can come back and then look at it afterwards, see what the webinar, what the topics were. So having said this, essentially, we're going to try and cover here three main topics today. Home internet, speaking a little bit about it, what's involved, what's needed, different questions you may have. Then electricity and mains gas, how we can do that utility-wise, and then water contracts too. Something new, a service I've just started doing a few months ago. On the last webinar, we did not speak of water contracts. We will speak today. It's a service I started providing clients because a lot of people were asking about it. And then obviously any inquiries, put that through to James, to Portugal list, and then he'll forward it on to me, and I'll be more than happy to reply back to clients. So having said this, starting off with internet. In Portugal, for high-speed internet, we have essentially three main providers, which I work with, which is Mio, Nosh, and Vodafone. Normally, the way it works is James forwards me the inquiry or the lead coming from any person checking on the Portugalist blog spot, and then obviously I reply back. One of the requirements the fields James has on his website is obviously putting your name, your email, if possible, a phone number, not for marketing, just so I can get back in touch with you on a WhatsApp call, for example, and the address. So I can check and reply back to you what type of service you have. And if possible, I always appreciate the coordinates of your property that you're going to buy, you're going to rent, or a Google Maps link. So that way I can identify it. Because sometimes here we can have an issue where the address you put down, I might not be able to find it, or the utilities companies have a slightly different address. So with the coordinates or the Google Maps link, it's precise and I can give you an exact answer. So having said this, obviously I've spoken, introduced a bit here about the home internet with the address. I can reply back to you. Then you have two types of services available, either fiber optics or glass fiber, however you want to label it, or 4G satellite service. Obviously, our aim is always to try and provide fiber internet, which is the best high-speed connection you can have. If it's not available, then we have to try and see a 4G solution. If you obviously have fiber internet available, you will then have three different speeds available. In terms of download speeds, you have 200 megabytes, 500 megabytes, 1000 megabytes. In terms of upload speeds, it's always 100 megabytes upload. And then on the 1000 megabytes download, we can get you 400 upload. In terms of traffic, which for people who are a bit confused what this means, traffic is the amount of internet you use during your month on your home internet. It is unlimited. You can be downloading 24 hours a day. You can be connecting. There's no problem whatsoever. So it's always has to do with which speed you want, and then your download consumption. Your traffic is unlimited. People ask me what would I recommend: 200, 500, or 1000. I would recommend at least 500 megabytes for one simple reason. The 200 megabyte speed will be sufficient for something more basic. However, the internet router or the modem that the operator supplies you, which is always free of charge, you do not pay it. That modem is a little bit older technology, Wi-Fi 5 technology, which might not give you the best performance. So that's why with 500 megabyte download or 1000 megabyte download, the operator supplies you a Wi-Fi 6 router, which is the best router on the market. So in terms of speed, 500 megabytes at least. At home myself, I have 1000 megabytes. People ask me, is it going to be strong enough? Yes. Last Christmas, we had here at home 17 people, all of us connected on Wi-Fi, kids doing the streaming, kids watching cartoons, adults watching some videos, Netflixing, and it was enough. It doesn't collapse. So it will be enough. It won't be in an issue where it's going to collapse. The speed won't be sufficient. And then if you really have a demanding work, or you need to have really stable connection by Wi-Fi, it's not the best speed you're getting. Always try and get a cable where you can connect from the router or the modem directly to your computer. People forget this concept a lot. I'm not that tech savvy, but obviously you learn over the years that if you have a cable connected to your computer, you get the full speed through, because by Wi-Fi, you can lose a little bit of speed. So that's always, if you do have a heavy downloading or uploading, always use a cable if you can. That guarantees the full speed. Then we have here another concept, which is cable internet. And we have to be very careful here on this item. Fiber internet is one thing. Cable internet is something different. You can have fiber via cable, which a lot of people go to some operators and they don't explain that. And when you have cable internet, you're going to have a big fluctuation in speed. Fiber optics, or glass fiber, as some people like to call it, that's guaranteed speed. And we see a lot of two or three new companies coming up on the market. Price is half the price, basically. The problem is they're selling you cable internet, not fiber internet. And then you're getting it for half the price, but then the quality is going to drop quite a bit. We have cases of clients that, for example, do cable internet, and then you can have 500 download right now. In about 30 minutes, you drop down to literally half the speed, or only 30 megabytes download. So it fluctuates quite a lot. Fiber optic is guaranteed speed there. James, are there any other questions as we speak? I'm going to carry along, but if you see any questions, feel free to introduce.
I think so. Would it be possible just to give an idea of prices for those 200, 500, and 1000? Just a general idea of what
a general idea, just for the home internet. Obviously, you can add mobile phones or SIM cards, cell phone lines, if you want to call it, but we'll speak with that in a bit. But just for the basic home internet, 200 megabytes, the average market price, you're looking currently at 40 euros per month. If you're looking at 500 megabyte internet, currently looking at 44 euros per month, 43, 44 euros for 500 megabytes. And then for the 1000 megabytes, the greatest speed available, it's currently coming in at 48 euros per month. Then there is one operator which is selling a special plan, which is 8 gigabytes download, 8 GB upload, and that goes a bit higher the price. But those are very special cases, which I tell people only unless you really need that, because it takes a bit longer to install. But that is available if needed now on the domestic market. It was company internet that was supplied only to companies. Now it's supplied to domestic clients. These prices here are always on 2-year contracts. Fiber has to be. There's no pay as you go. And now that we touch this issue of the contracts, people become very scared and frightened. I'm tying myself into 2-year contracts. What does this mean, Fernando? What if I want to leave? First of all, as I said, it has to be a 2-year contract because the company does not charge you equipment, no installation fee. It's all under their responsibility. Or if your router or modem stops working in a few months, they will replace it. You call the technical support. Then you have here two different possibilities. Imagine you're renting a property. Many people do it to have a lease. And then after 1 year or 7 months or 2 years, you move to a different address. We can change the service to a different address. You can come back to me and I can organize that. That's one situation, and no penalties applied for early leave. A different situation is, imagine you're here, and then after 1 year, you have come try Portugal, things didn't go as planned, and then you need to go back to your home country. Then the operators, and the law obviously states this, they can cancel your contract without penalty. However, obviously they're going to be very rigorous. You have to probably they're going to have to supply, for example, proof you're moving back to your country of origin permanently. Ask, for example, for a rental contract of the new country, or taxes proving that you are moving there. Once you supply the necessary details, which is dealt at the shop of the operator, they cancel it free of charge. And then imagine you don't really have any proof, you simply want to end the contract. What is the penalty? So we have an idea. Roughly, the penalty is something along the lines of 30% of what is left to pay on your contract. Your contract is always paid on a monthly basis, always. The service is installed today, for example, and in 30 days, your first bill comes through there. So that's a bit how it works in terms of billing and contract. So don't be frightened with the 2-year contract. It's mandatory. You can always get around it if you're going to go to a different house.
That's very good to know. And Bill is asking whether Mayo offers a 10 gigabyte service.
Yes, it does. And
Okay.
that's the operator. I don't like to say names, but they're, yes, Mail
Okay.
obviously the operator 10 gigabytes. I will leave this note out. And I can tell that my supervisor in Mail, they're always hassling me because I'm giving a different information. Even though it's advertised 10 gigabytes, it's not 10 gigabytes. Because then when we look at the contract, it is technically only 8 gigabytes because that service needs 2 gigabytes to operate, which means you as a client is left with 8 gigabytes download, 8 gigabytes upload. And then the law states that whatever speed you contract, you cannot have a drop greater than 30%. So the maximum drop in speed you can have is 30%, or else they have to send a technician and fix it up. Now, in terms of this 8 gigabytes, which is advertised as 10 gigabytes, but essentially it is 8 gigabytes of internet speed left for the client, be very careful on one thing. And I've had clients committing this mistake that they say, oh, I want to have 8 gigabytes, I can afford it, I want to have better speed. But the question is, do you have a computer? Do you have an iPad which is compatible with the best processor? Because if you grab a common laptop or a computer that's 2 or 3 years old, it simply will not be able to get the 8 gigabytes. It doesn't have the processor which processes the speed. It doesn't have that capacity for that speed. So unless you're really tech savvy and you have the best state-of-the-art computers with really good processors, there's no point in doing the 8 gigabytes, in my honest opinion. And obviously I receive more commission for it, but I'm being honest. What's the point in doing 8 gigabyte contract if your computer cannot supply you that speed? Might as well stick with the general, let's say 1 gigabyte to 1000 megabytes per second speed and 400 upload, which will be sufficient. I've done some contracts on the 8 gigabytes, but I had a client today who had a bit of a nasty surprise when he realized his computer was 2 years old, a MacBook, and it simply would not get him 8 gigabytes. And then he was stuck. He couldn't then go and downgrade the speed. So yes, it's 8 gigabytes, and please be careful. Make sure you have the right equipment that can supply that speed.
Okay, that's really, really good to know. And just when you mentioned downgrading the speed, I noticed there is a question from someone asking if they can increase the speed of their current connection. And I guess there's two ways you could look at that. One would be sort of improving your home setup, and the second one will be changing contract, perhaps from the 200 to the 500 or 1000.
Yes. You can always upgrade your contract, never downgrade. When you're doing
Okay.
a contract, a price is established. That means you have to pay that price minimum. You subscribe to 200 megabytes, yes, you can go to 500 megabytes or 1,000, or then from the 1,000 to the 8 gigabytes at any moment. There's no charge. When you do it, pay attention. You do a contract today, 6 months down the road, you realize, well, the 200 megabytes isn't exactly enough. I want to upgrade to 500. A new 2 year contract change is applied every time you touch your contract. And obviously, when you go to upgrade, unfortunately, I cannot help you upgrade. You have to go directly to the operator. But be careful with that. Sometimes you don't explain that properly. Every time you touch your contract, add something on or increase the speed, a new 2 year contract is applied there.
Okay. And Susan's asking whether it would be obvious whether the provider is giving you fiber or cable internet.
I can tell you that difference. Let's put it this
Okay.
way. In terms of the operators, Mel, any option they give you, when it's stated fiber, it's fiber. End of story. Nosh has fiber and cable internet. Even though when you contact, for example, the operator directly, they'll tell you it's fiber, but they won't tell you it's cable internet, coax cable, supplied by coax cable. I can tell you that. When I see it, I can give you that example. And then in terms of Vodafone, Vodafone is fiber. And then what happens with Vodafone is when they're in some rural areas, their fiber lines cannot support greater than 400 megabytes download in rural areas. But again, I have that information here on system when I check the address. When you're dealing directly with the operator, you could be a bit stuck where they might not give you all that information. And in terms of, since we're speaking of the operators and myself, the prices are exactly the same. The difference when some people ask me why would it be an advantage working with me, language wise, you can understand what I'm saying. If you are still abroad, I can do you the contract. If you were abroad and you try and get in touch with the operator, you don't have a Portuguese phone number, they won't be able to do the contract. What I'm allowed is I do the contracts in PDF, you sign it. So that way, imagine you're in America, you're coming over in 1 month, you want to make sure internet is installed on that first day. You get in touch, you supply all the details, and I can guarantee the booking for that day. So that's the advantage. No language barrier with me, and I can guarantee you that the contract is done same price as being in the shop or on their helpline.
And how if someone was moving into a new property right now, how long would it take to get the internet set up if they hadn't thought about this in advance?
It depends really where you are. In the bigger cities, within 2 to 3 days, you can get installed.
Okay.
I've had cases of a client contact me at 9 in the morning and have internet installed in the afternoon, for example, in Lisbon, where there's many technicians. But let's give us a bit of breathing space and 2 to 3 days. In a rural area, you might have to wait a little bit more, but no more than a week of maximum. Always, the earlier you do it, the better. It's better we don't work under pressure so we can do things with time and doing things properly. So I think it's always good we do it with a bit of
Yeah.
time and you have all the time possible. There is another issue which could arise. So you do the contract, we book installation, and all of a sudden the technician arrives and says it can't be done today, and clients become frustrated. I stated there is fiber and the technician can't install on that day. What could happen? Fiber is brought from the road, what we call the connection boxes. We call them PDOs. And what could happen is on the operator's internal system, they haven't updated that connection box, plastic box on the road, has, for example, 8 or 10 different slots. And they haven't realized all those slots are already being used for clients. And they might have to expand those boxes. This could be some infrastructure work, which could take 1 or 2 or 3 weeks. So it could happen where they know where they arrive, and all of a sudden it may not be able to install. That's something I cannot overcome. We have to wait until the technician arrives. But in general, the vast majority of installations are always possible to install, especially in buildings, because if it has 8 apartments, that's 8 slots. If one client leaves, it's the same slot being used. When it's houses on the road, probably not all the houses have had fiber yet. And imagine on one road, on one street, you had 10 houses, and now the 11th house is trying to connect. Then the operator only realizes when that 11th house is connecting, then they have to expand that. But again, in the vast majority of the cases, it never fails. It's always installed on that day. But it could happen where they might have to do some minor infrastructure work, which could delay a few days. But again, we can only know when the technician is there on that day.
Okay, that's really good to know. And it sounds like one of the things you were saying was someone could be abroad and they or even in Portugal, and they could arrange for the internet to be set up basically on the day they move in or perhaps the day after.
It's happened to me. Obviously, I
Okay.
don't like that because obviously working under pressure, but it can be done. Obviously,
Okay.
it depends where you are. For example, in some cities there are quite a few technicians waiting for work. They don't have work, so obviously a new contract comes in. The client, we try and do it, but then I have to, because when the client contacts me, they have to send me all their details. I'll go through a small checklist of, so you know what it is. Then I have to do the contract PDF, send it over to the client. Client signs. I then try and get installation slot. So it's not impossible to do for the same day, but it could be a little bit difficult. So it's always good you allow some time. That's why I say if you're thinking moving to Portugal, you know you're arriving next week, one of the items on your checklist, internet. Get it sorted beforehand.
Okay. Well, that's really, really helpful because I think soon as you move into your new place, you're going to need the internet straight away because you're going to have a million things that you need to research. So that
I
should
would
be number
say
one.
internet is as essential as the air we breathe. We can't live without internet.
Basically,
So
yeah.
it is what it is. So try and get as early as possible. Now, since we're speaking here of internet contracts, we haven't spoken yet about mobile phone, SIM cards, cell phone lines, however you want to call it, depending where you're coming from in the world. We can always, as part of the bundle of the home internet, we can always add a SIM card or a cell phone line. Those SIM cards, you have different data available on those SIM cards where they can have 10 gigabytes, 20 unlimited data. And then I give you the different prices on the email. Basically, when I reply to a client, all the option goes. James is used to it. He sees all the options I sent. And then we bundle that up. Then that means that when you're outside of your house, you obviously don't have the Wi-Fi available, and you have mobile data when you're driving around for GPS, for example, if you need to check your email, social media, whatever you need it for. People sometimes ask me how much data is needed. That's kind of like a bit of a tricky question to answer. Depends on how much data you probably use. Obviously, if you're coming from, let's say, from a different country where you probably know your way around, you really don't use your internet connection a lot, your mobile data. But obviously, if you're here, you're trying to learn the different roads, and you might need a little bit more. I would say, as a bare minimum, the 10 gigabyte data on the cell phone line, the SIM cards, as a bare minimum. But obviously, then you can go 20 gigabytes or unlimited. Personally, I have unlimited. Always have a lot of business issues to deal with, but I think that unlimited gives you peace of mind where you know you have unlimited data. And if you're traveling and you're going on holidays and you go to a hotel, probably the Wi-Fi is a little bit weak. At least you have a backup plan if you need it. Then, in terms of roaming, roaming, something here important we have to explain is that if you are roaming in Europe, you're fairly good. It's affordable. It's included. When you're going outside of Europe, and clients who've worked with me, they know what this statement is mine. Only use your SIM card or your cell phone lines outside of Europe in case of life or death, because it's very expensive outside Europe. You should always get a local SIM card when traveling outside Europe. One main difference in terms of roaming is that your mobile data is basically the same. You subscribe to a 10 gigabyte mobile data plan on your SIM card, on your cell phone line, you get the same data across Europe. When we speak of Europe, it's the Schengen space, the 27 countries, plus Denmark, plus Sweden, and still the UK, England for now. There hasn't been any changes. Then, if you subscribe to unlimited data in Portugal, when you're roaming across Europe, it's not unlimited data. They cap you down to around 60 gigabytes, which is still enough. But obviously, so there's no abusive usage when you're outside of Portugal. And then finally, many are probably thinking, well, what happens? Is it a physical SIM card you supply or is it an eSIM? Whichever you want. I always have physical SIM cards with me. When we do the contract, I automatically assign you the numbers I have you, one of them. And then if you want to use that physical SIM card, I'll ask you for an address or someone of trust, a lawyer, an estate agent, or a friend. I'll send you that physical SIM card in the post. And you have that. It's a prepaid, it's a pay as you go, let's say, SIM card. And then once the home internet is installed, it then upgrades up to 48 hours later onto the data you subscribe to on your SIM card, whether 10 gigabytes, 20, or unlimited. Now, many of the modern smartphones are eSIMs. So obviously, for people who don't know what is an eSIM, it's basically instead of a physical SIM, it's an electronic SIM where you have a QR code you scan in and then the phone works with that. That you can get that once the home internet is installed. You then have to go to someone's writing here, but Ireland is not in Schengen, I believe. Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom. It will work. When we say in roaming, United Kingdom, we technically mean England, Scotland, Ireland, both all of Ireland. So yes, that is part of the roaming. As I was saying, so the eSIM, once it's installed, your physical home internet at home and the router up and running, you then go to the store of the operator and they give you an eSIM on there. Those eSIMs, I don't have them yet. It's something that still needs to evolve a little bit here in Portugal, where the operators don't have a lot of eSIMs for us to give automatically. You get that at a shop, but once it's installed, they give you the eSIM straight away. One one thing I do want to say is that in terms of eSIMs, and some people aren't aware of this, when you have an eSIM installed in your mobile phone, your cell phone, it's a QR code which is installed once. If you change your phone, then that QR code is no longer valid. You have to go back to the operator store and the shop, and they have to give you a new QR code. So I think if your phone supports a physical SIM, I still defend a little bit the physical SIM. It's easier to put in one phone, take it out, pop it into another. An eSIM, it only can be scanned into one device, and that's it. You change to a new phone, a new device, you have to get a new eSIM card.
Okay. That's really, really useful to know.
There. In terms here, so basically, so you have here an idea of how the SIM cards work. It can be bundled in if you want, and you can choose. In terms of coverage, people ask, is it 5G? Is it 4G? It's always hard to give an exact answer depending where you're located. In all major cities in Portugal, the major cities have 5G. Lisbon, Porto, Coimbra, even the small city, they all have it. I've seen cities with a population of literally 10,000 people already having 5G towers, and it works fine. As you go into more rural area, you have 4G. We used to have 3G, and literally last month, all operators have finished the migration from the 3G towers. They've upgraded to 4G. So don't be afraid where you're going to be stuck in the middle of nowhere without a phone reception. You can probably count the number of times that happens, probably 3 or 4 times of a location in a country where it doesn't have coverage. You'll have sufficient coverage across all of the country without having to worry. So we've evolved a lot. From my experience and the contact I have with people from different nationalities, the general statement people make me is that, wow, Fernando, you have here in Portugal a better 4G and 5G reception on the mobile phones, the cell phones, better than we have back home. And this is a comment. I had a client the other day coming from the suburbs of New York. He says, wow, you install 500 megabyte internet here in Portugal, and it is way more stable than what I had back in New York. In New York, I only had a maximum of 15 megabytes. So in terms of internet here, we are quite a few years ahead. We've in the past 10 years, massive investment has been done. That's why we have here many people coming over, working online. Many people are moving to Portugal because the internet is very good here.
Thank you so much for that, Fernando. So if people were trying to work out, they're going to move to a new house and they're wondering, number one, will I be able to get fiber at this place? And number two, what sort of coverage for mobile phones is there going to be, and which network should I go to? How do you work that out? Is that something that you can help with?
Yeah, so when the client sends the inquiry through, and then I see the address, and if they send the GPS coordinates, I can see straight away if there's fiber. If I can't see it, I'll ask the operator directly. If there's a small doubt here on system, where I'll ask for the infrastructure department to reply me with a more accurate answer if there is fiber or not. And then being fiber, it's fine. In terms of the 5G coverage, it'll work fine at the house. In the cities, always 5G without any issues, or at least 4G. Now, something else is, imagine you're in a house in a stone walled house, or a building with like top of state of the art installation that could block off a bit the 4G connection or the 5G. That's something no operator can pass that difficulty, but you will have enough to make a call, but probably will block a little bit the reception due to the insulation. But the fiber inside the house will always work fine because fiber is fed with the fiber cable coming inside the house connecting to the router. And since we're speaking of the house, another issue as well, I'm going to a two-floor, two-story house. Will the router be strong enough? If it's more than one floor, normally the router won't be strong enough. There's no router in the world that can simply spread the Wi-Fi signal enough to 2 or 3 different floors. So what you have to do then is get a Wi-Fi repeaters, which you can put throughout the house on the different floors, so that you can have reception and can spread it out. Or to even more of an accurate job, the main router is installed by the operator, and then you can have someone tech savvy or an IT guy come in and then stretch a cable from the main router to the other level of the house or the property, put a second router, and that guarantees the full speed of the second router, and then a second Wi-Fi network. In some cases, if needed, I can put you in touch with a technician who can do that for you. You always have to pay that privately out of your pocket, because when they install Wi-Fi, the home internet, the contract states they put one main router. The operator is not obliged, if you have a three-story house, to put three different routers. Even though the operators offer you the option of getting repeaters or power lines or selling a second router, I still keep on defending you should get a private technician to do it for you, because obviously the operators have hundreds of thousands of clients. If you get someone locally to do it and you have any doubts, he'll easily remember what he did for you and he can come back and do it for you at a small fee. So I still think it makes sense. If you can't install a Wi-Fi repeater at your house, you get technicians to come in privately and do it for you.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. And just going back to what you were saying about 4G and 5G coverage, there's a comment there saying that the people had been in Portugal and they were able to do video calls off of their phones, or to tether their phones to their laptops and do calls like that. And that's certainly been my experience as well. Throughout, I would say pretty much most of Portugal, I have a very, very good connection throughout. You can do WhatsApp calls constantly, even while moving around. There's obviously a couple of areas in the countryside where you do get black spots. So the next question that I have for you, Fernando, is given that the quality of mobile internet is very good in Portugal, does this mean you don't need to get fiber internet as well?
I'll answer that question. Just I want to go back a little bit on your
Okay.
statement and saying someone was saying that they could do video calls, for example. That for me is a minimum requirement. You can normally always do a WhatsApp call, a video call, a Zoom call off your mobile phone, 4G, 5G. That would be a minimum requirement. It'll always work. When we reach a point in the world where we're speaking of fiber, 500 megabytes, 1,000 megabytes, and we think, well, if I have a 4G reception, it's only 3 or 4 or 5 megabytes. I won't be able to do that call. It will work. I had recently an experience where I was in a very rural area. I did a video call via WhatsApp. I thought this can be a hard one here. I'm in a very difficult area. I did the call. It was good enough. At the end, I did a speed test, and the speed was 2 megabytes. So that's why I'm saying you are always going to have good enough quality where you are, unless you have small black holes, as James was saying, but very, very spontaneous cases, not a lot across the country, very, very rarely, especially more the inlands. Now, going back to the main question, James was saying, what's the difference of do we need fiber or can we just use a 4G connection? Obviously, for me, there's a major difference. If you have a 4G connection, you can have 7 megabytes, 10 megabytes, 15, 20, 30, depending where you are. Fiber gives you a guaranteed speed. Fiber is fiber. And there's no doubt about that. You can get a stable connection there. You'll always have a good reception. For example, 4G and 5G can vary a little bit, fluctuate. If, for example, if we're in the middle of a storm of bad weather, those 5G or 4G towers could fluctuate a bit of speed. With fiber, it'll normally be able to hold well, it's properly built, unless a very high wind tornado comes and snaps the fiber cables outside, obviously. But under normal usage, it'll always be able to hold much better. And fiber gives a much more solid solution to clients. And imagine you're at home, you have kids, or you have 3 or 4 people trying to use Netflix or streaming. Obviously, that's almost impossible on a 4 or 5G connection, having 4 or 5 people at the same time on a 4G hotspot. On a home router, on fiber internet, that's a piece of cake. It'll work well.
Yes, and I think one thing we discussed on the last webinar was that some areas, particularly like the Algarve, which get a lot of tourism, they have a sort of a strain in the summer with an increased number of tourists, and then that can slow things down as well.
That's true. I mean, if you're in a tourist area or a big city, especially in the Algarve, where you have a lot of tourists coming in all of a sudden, yes, the service might drop a little bit. It's normal. More you have a heavier usage for that. That could be a bit of a change. And James, speaking of the Algarve, that's a location I emphasize a lot. The Algarve, please make sure you always send coordinates. There's a big difference between the addresses utility companies give us and what the address we find here on system. So the Algarve, mandatory, always coordinates. For example, Lisbon, Porto, those bigger cities, there's not that huge of a difference on the addresses, but in the Algarve, I have a big difficulty where if I put the address the client supplies me or the postal code, it'll say no fiber. But then at the end of the day, with the coordinates, I do find that building and it does have fiber. So yes, always try and put the coordinates or Google Maps link, please.
Okay. And when someone does fill out that form, um, will they get a choice of different operators? If someone has a house in Portugal, do they get to pick between, say, 3 or 4 different fiber internet providers?
Yes, obviously, when I reply to the inquiry, I will state if there's fiber or not fiber.
Okay.
And then if fiber, I can check how many operators. You have cases where only one operator has fiber, so it's pretty obvious. Or then we have two operators available, but then one has fiber internet, one has cable internet. So it's pretty simple that going to the fiber internet. And then, for example, one operator is good in the sense that it has an English helpline where the others don't, and that's important too. One of the operators, it has a bit of a small problem, a small issue to me, that when you call the helpline, it's an artificial intelligence robot answering that helpline. And then if you literally say in English, speak with an assistant, it doesn't recognize it, and you're going to be there ages. So that's always another issue, that if we have one operator, more than one with fiber, and if one of the operators that does have fiber has an English dedicated helpline, that's an advantage for you. If you do have a technical support issue, you have to contact the operator. That I cannot help, because when you're at home, they're going to ask you to do a speed test, a live speed test with you, and then they'll automatically book a technician to come around. So those technical issues has to be sorted with the operator directly through their helplines. Clients always ask me, Fernando, is it you coming over to install? No, I only do the business part of it. I sell the plan to you, I help you do the contract, and then I will be in touch with the technician. Normally on the contract, my number is left if needed, so the technician can speak with me, and I'll be there to help you. Any doubt you have afterwards, I'll be more than happy to try and answer to you if any questions I may have. And in terms of when I answer to these emails, and James know, I really try to do a marathon every day of replying on the same day to emails. If I do not answer on that same day, it's not being me lazy. If you check then afterwards, you're going to see many Google reviews of my services. I think I can consider myself as being very efficient and replying on the same day, but obviously some days a bit more overwhelmed than others. If I don't reply on that day, I will come back on the other. I do not leave any email to reply to. That's not the way I work. Having grown up in Canada, I have a different vision of business. I think all inquiries have to be replied to. It's a question of respect. It's a question of being well educated to people. If you take your time to put an inquiry through Portugal list, it is James's obligation to forward that inquiry to me. And then ultimately at the end of the line, it's my obligation to give a reply back. You might not be able to get the service you want or you dream of, but I have to give an answer. So yes, you will get an answer from me. If I don't answer on one day, I'll come back on the other. I'm a human being. Sometimes we have personal issues or become sick. I remember back in November, I was very sick, high fever in bed 2 days. It was a bit chaotic. I had some people saying, Fernando, did you receive my email? Yes, I did. I'll reply back. But then when you come to Portugal, you see some people take probably 3, 4 days or 1 week to reply. That does not happen with me. An initial contact will be made with you. If there's a more technical issue, which I may take a few days to assess, but I will be in touch with you saying, have to check this with the operator, and I'll come back within 2 to 3 days. But an initial reply you will get from me always.
Okay, fantastic. That's and I can confirm that. I know I can see the emails sometimes going back and forth, and I have seen some pretty fast replies from Fernando, and I don't think I've seen that from many other businesses in Portugal. Sometimes in under an hour or less. So I'm always very happy to forward people onto Fernando. I've got one more question just on
Sure.
the mobile phone area, and we can come back to that at the end. But I do want to also cover the other ones, which is just about sort of basically choosing a package. People have asked about whether they should get their phone and their internet together, whether there's family plans for phones. So I think maybe just a couple of minutes on what options there are and whether you can bundle things together.
When I say the options of the bundles, I always put the price with one SIM card included, because if you need a SIM card, a cell phone line, you're going to need at least one SIM card. And then if you need more, I put the price. Additional SIM cards are so much euros per month. Then obviously there are bundles for families. So it's a question of you letting me know how many SIM cards you need. When you're doing the inquiry, obviously if you say we are a family of 3 coming over, we need 3 SIM cards, 3 cell phone lines. It's always easier if you state that, so I can give you the price with you. I can work the maths out for you. And yes, it's worth doing the bundle. Probably another question which might be here, people asking, I think I saw it. Well, what if I get a pay as you go, for example? It's a question of what you decide to do. Some pay as you go SIM cards, I will state it, yes, they may be cheaper than on the bundle. It's a fact. However, with the pay as you go, you have to be conscious of two things. Some pay as you go companies, and there was one company mentioned here, don't want to be being here speaking bad of one of the other companies, but they are these low cost companies where they give crazy prices. They use secondary towers of the operators. Imagine, for example, one operator, operator A, has all their clients served, and then they have a low-cost operator which says, okay, we are going to use your towers for our clients. However, since the main operator says you or your clients are going to be secondary clients, which first our clients, then your low-cost clients, probably you're going to see a difference in coverage if you go to the low-cost companies which are on the market. And then you see, even though they're using the same towers as the main company A, that company always has to give the best service to their clients. So be aware of that. Another issue, when you get a pay-as-you-go, you have to top it up every month, which could be a bit confusing. I forgot to put 15 euros on it this month. And then for the first consequence is your number could be blocked. You lose that number. And then imagine you arrived here, get a pay-as-you-go, a cheapy SIM card, and you open a bank account, and then all of a sudden you forgot to top up your SIM card, and then that number is lost. You cannot recover it, and then you have to go back to your bank to change it all. Could be a bit of a headache. So I think on that perspective, always good bundling it and guaranteeing that number is kept. And then second of all, when you are traveling, roaming across Europe, those pay-as-you-go low-cost SIM cards, the vast majority of them will not work outside Portugal. When you bundle, those SIM cards will work across Portugal. And since we're speaking here SIM cards, something very important we hadn't mentioned yet, when you're traveling abroad, we have already stated here, you get data on abroad as if we're in Portugal. The only exception is unlimited data in Portugal. On the SIM cards, you only get around 60 gigabytes in roaming and local calls. When imagine you go to France and you try to do a local call, those calls are not included. When they supply 3,500 minutes and text messages, it is only to Portuguese numbers. Even if you're roaming, for example, in France or in England and you're calling the local number, that call is still considered an international call. So be aware of that. That is the cost you have to pay. So think twice if you have to do a local call, or if you can do a lot of local calls, probably get a local SIM card just for the basic calls. Someone asking, will I be able to keep my phone number from the USA? This popped up and it brings us a question asked a lot of times. That keeping your foreign numbers, you have to always ask your operator of your home country. The Portuguese operators will not deal with keeping your foreign numbers. Your foreign numbers are an issue with them. Same as if you have a Portuguese number and you're going to America, for example, the American operators won't be able to keep the Portuguese numbers because they are numbers sourced from a different country, a different operator. So there are ways of keeping your numbers from back home. I've seen clients doing it. I don't exactly know how it's done, but you'll see a lot of stuff on Facebook, for example, social media, people who have done it, and they'll explain how. But the Portuguese number cannot overtake your international number. Your Portuguese number is your Portuguese number.
Okay, thank you so much for covering all of that, Fernando. Is there anything else that you want to say about internet or phones before we move on?
Two very quick points.
Okay.
Like all utility companies, when you do a contract, always the bills are electronic bills, which is sent to your email on a monthly cycle, and direct debit payments, meaning that the bill is paid out of your bank account every month. And bank accounts is not easy to open. We all know how it is, not that easy. So what's happening is that you always do a contract with electronic billing. So your bill is sent every month to your email and direct debit off your bank account. Now, if these bank accounts have to be Portuguese bank accounts, preferably always, but if you have a European bank account, we can get that accepted too. But for that, you have to always give me a proof of your bank account. Imagine you have a Wise account. As long as it says your name on it, it's a European Euro account. It has the IBAN, the SWIFT code, and it clearly says it has your name and the IBAN on it. I can use it. Or you can get your bank statement and just blank off all the financial information. But you have to prove me that European bank account is yours and you belong to it. The operators will have to do it, because if for example, the fiber internet operator sends a direct debit authorization to, for example, to a bank account in France or a Wise account, the first thing they're going to ask, where's this proof this client is the account holder of this? So it's important you have to supply that, and we can do it. And then just a very quick notes of people, well, what is needed to do a contract? I'm going to do a quick go through here my checklist, which always goes on to emails, but essentially I have to have your address, which you supply initially, if possible, GPS coordinates, copy of your passport or your ID card so we can identify your ID, your NIF number, which is essential in Portugal, and if you have your NIF number document too, so it can prove your NIF number is obviously belongs to you. A phone number so I can contact you if needed, whether it's an international number is accepted. If you're already here and using already a pay-as-you-go SIM card, we can use that number and put that as part of a bundle. We can do portability of one operator to the other. Your email, so I can email you all the documents and where the bill is going to be going to, proof of address, your lease contract, your rental contract, your sales deed proving you've bought the property, or your promissory contract, something that proves you are going to take possession of that property. So the operator knows that you are the correct person who is legally allowed to do the contract. Your bank details, as an IBAN, preferably always Portuguese bank account. If it's an European account, we can find a solution and use it. And then obviously your preferred date of installation. And saying, Fernando, I want the installation on this day, whether morning or afternoon, and then we can work around that.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. So I think that covers the main things
Yep.
for internet for now, but I know there are probably going to be other questions about that because that is one of the most popular things for people, and something that people really want to get right, make sure they have a good internet connection. Moving on to electricity and gas, which is another thing. Perhaps I'll let you just sort of explain how that works in Portugal, Fernando, and then I'll follow up with a few questions.
Yeah. Electricity, there's same type of situation. Electricity is possible to do, fairly simple. Here, we always need to have the previous bill of the tenant who was there before you, or the owner, because the electricity bill, doesn't matter which operator it is, it's going to have a code. We call it CPE, Código Ponto Entrega, which is the code for the delivery of that electricity connection, of the power supply. So I need that's on the bill. If you give me the previous bill, I can do it, and that's it. Then all the documents that you need for internet, the same applies here, and we can do the contracts. In my case specifically, I work with two companies for electricity, but there's literally a dozen or more on the market. I work with these two only for one simple reason. They are companies that make it very easy to do the contract without hassles. There are some companies on the market who you have to be taking a boring phone call, 20 minutes on the phone. Their English might not be perfect to try and do the contract. So I work with two companies because they are easy to subscribe to. One big advantage of the electricity, the power market, is that, and when we speak of power, electricity, also main gas. Main gas meaning that the building has piped gas coming into the property. Obviously, if you're in a building without gas, piped gas, or in a rural area, you then have to get your bottled gas. That obviously you don't need a contract for. You buy your bottle of gas as you need it. Then for electricity or mains gas, the good news is there's not really a contract where you're obliged to be in that. You can just move out to another company whenever you want. I normally recommend clients try the first 3 or 4 months, so you get the three bills, see how it goes, see how much electricity you're spending, see what the prices are, and then there could be some changes on the market, and then all of a sudden you find a different supplier, he's better. You can change it over instantly to that new supplier, and it's sorted. No cost involved, so it's fairly simple. So that's a bit how electricity works. Then it's a question of knowing how much power is connected to that property. Is it 15 amps, 20 amps, 30 amps on single phase, or even three phase, for example? Three phase can be done also, nothing too difficult. Three phase, same as single phase. With the bill, we can do it. And then normally, if the previous tenant had, for example, 20 amps, I say take that same power, never less. As a minimum, I would say try 20 amps, because less than that, you can have your electrical board switching on and off, or go to the full 30 amps. Obviously, you pay a little bit more per month, but it's nothing massive. I mean, people ask, how much is it per month? That's a difficult question, because with internet, it's unlimited traffic, so I know how much you're going to pay, nothing more than that. With electricity, it depends how many kilowatts, how much electricity do you spend? Do you have heating on? Do you have an air conditioning on? But let's say the average household, two people, for example, three, spend 150 kilowatts, you're probably looking at, let's say, 50 euros. I mean, I don't want to say you can do it with 25 euros and then say, wait, for now, you said on the webinar 25 euros, I'm paying more. But let's say 50 euros, you're probably going to pay less. So that'll be enough. Nothing major. Then depending, if you probably have an air conditioning on, or an electrical heater the whole day, probably you're going to easily pay, let's say, 100, 200 euros per month if you're using a lot of power. But that's difficult to see a forecast of how much electricity you're going to spend. It all depends when you come in and we're actually having the power on and how much it is. Also, in terms of electricity, it can be a case where people say, well, Fernando, the previous tenant left, the landlord or the owner turned the power off. What happens? Obviously, this year is essential. You try and get back as early as possible, because then we need to ask the electricity company to turn the power on. Normally, they won't need to go inside the house. They can do it externally, where on system they turn the power back on to that apartment or to that house. But if needed, if the electricity meter is inside the house, someone might need to open the door so the technician can go in, open the electrical box, and reconnect the wires. So, but still, in that case, if someone contacts me today saying I don't have any power on at the apartment, when can I move in? It'll probably take 4 to 5 working days for them to reestablish the connection.
Okay, that's really, really helpful to know. And there is one question here: if you don't know who the previous tenants were, how do you get a copy of the electric bill?
Normally the landlord will have a bill somehow,
Okay,
or will know it there. If not, it takes me a bit longer. What I'll have to do is I have to call the company which manages all of the electrical sector. I have to give them the exact address and see if they can find that CPE code which identifies that property, that apartment. But normally the previous tenant will have an electricity bill always available, or the landlord or the seller, they'll always have that. And as I always tell, when I deal with a few estate agents, I tell them, tell your sellers, don't turn the power off. Always keep the power on because it makes it much easier. Switch it over. Having the power off delays it here 5 days, for example. So normally they will keep the power on. And then if they don't have the bill, I'll find that code. It's a bit more of a headache, but we can still get around it.
okay, that's really, really useful to know. Let's see what other questions we have related to electricity. So it is worth saying that the you can move into somewhere. I think you mentioned it, and if it is on the lowest power, you can have two devices on, like say a hairdryer and a microwave. It can knock it out. How easy is it to upgrade from that to say the next level is
That's fairly simple. As long as
okay?
the electrical board of the property is physically prepared to receive a higher voltage, they can upgrade from 15 to 20 or 30 amps there.
Okay.
The issue is that, again, I'm not an electrician, but of my knowledge, what happens when you have an electrical board at home? Everyone's seen it has those small little switches on there. Normally, those switches are connected to two or three different plugs, or for a room or for a kitchen. At my house, for example, I've literally had my wife's been ironing, have the electrical oven on and the electrical kettle, and the board didn't turn off, the power didn't go off, because each switch corresponds to a different appliance that's normally of heavier usage. But yes, it is always possible to upgrade as long as the electrical board is prepared for that. But normally when they do it, they put electrical boards prepared to receive up to 30 amps, unless the more older houses or properties, that could be a bit more tricky. But then it says on the electrical board up to how many amps it is there to be used.
Okay. And when people get something like gas or electricity, is the unit the cost per unit of electricity, is that something that can go up and down, or do people pay fixed rate amounts for either electricity or gas?
When we had here with COVID at the beginning of the Ukraine war, obviously there was a major shift here in prices up and down. Now lately the prices are stabilizing, and the
Okay.
prices will then be more or less the same during the 6 months or a year. There is a lot of pressure on that, but normally lately the prices have been fairly acceptable and stable. I remember back 2 years ago in 2022 when the war started, for example, or even during COVID, that was a bit more fluctuating, going up and down. But then again, with the electricity market, since you're not really tied into a contract, if after 3 4 months you see a different supplier came around with a fabulous deal, at least as they stated there, and it's cheaper, you can easily move it over, because you are going to pay your bill. You have three different costs on the bill. First of all, your actual power supply, how many cents you pay for each kilowatt that is consumed, that is spent. Something else is your daily cost for connection, depending on how many amperes you have, 15, 20, 30 amps or more. You have a daily cost you have to pay. And then you have your taxes on top of that, which for the first normally 100 kilowatts, you only pay 6% tax currently. Then after that, it goes up to 23%. So those are the three items that make the bill. And then when I see some electrical companies saying, oh, we offer you 1 month free or whatever, that's 1 month of your power consumption, not of your connection cost, not of your taxes. So always careful with that. The prices are always then plus tax. So we can get you connected here to your company to make it easier for you. And then when you're here and you start seeing different offers, you start selling it in the country. Before you move, make sure that they're being clear what their costs are. And then when you do want to move, just move. You can change your contract to a different company. It's very easy to do.
Okay, that's very good to know. And is there any sites or resources that you recommend if people really want to be frugal and compare costs between different companies?
I mean, you'll find some websites on the market. You can just research it on Google. But then again, what I find for those comparison sites is that a lot of times they're missing a cost, or whether it's the taxes on that, or whether they're normally, on my experience, there's always one cost missing, and then when you go to do the contract, there's something extra added on. So you can check those websites. And I think word of mouth, speaking with other people, what's their real experience, which company with them was better, this company was cheaper, but then they had bad service, this company here was very simple to deal with. You're going to end up speaking with different people, different experiences, and then you can see what you get.
Okay. And what about those who have gone into a new build that hasn't had anyone living there before?
If you go to new builds,
Hmm.
as part of the habitation license, the license passed by City Hall declaring that property is safe to live in, obviously that already has an electricity connection done. It has to be ready to receive electricity. It's mandatory by law. City Hall makes that reinforces it. So if you buy a new house, your seller or whoever is selling the property onto you, they'll have everything in order. They'll have that code, CPE code, even if it's never been built. They'll give you there's a company called Erridge, which is the company that deals with all infrastructure in Portugal. All the electricity companies, when you have a technical issue, you call that company Erridge, and they sort it out. It's managed by the government. They make sure everything is working well. That company gives a connection code, that's CPE, and that's a lifetime code, never changes. So it's a new build, no problem. You have that code. You wait the 4 to 5 working days. They connect it. It's sorted.
Okay. And potencia, is that the same as amps? Because I've noticed both words have come up.
It's different here.
Okay.
Potencia is 4.6 kVAs, which then relates to, for example, 20 amps, and then 6.9 kVAs that relates to 30 amps there.
Okay, that's good to know. So I don't know if you have anything else that you want to say about electricity and gas.
I was checking on my notes. So pretty much that's about it. Electricity is pretty much standard to make, and gas. So it's very simple to do. Again, all done online. So it's not really nothing more to state about that. It's pretty straightforward. Electricity comes supplied in. We have the electrical board properly done. You can, for example, you can go to a lower potencia or a lower amperage of 20 amps, for example, is what I have in my house. And then you can see what's not enough. You can upgrade it afterwards, because obviously the higher the upgrade, the more you have to pay. And then here on the electricity contracts, another big advantage is you can drop from 30 amps to 20 amps, and there's no cost. Your contract doesn't go to start again, different from internet. You can here
Okay.
easily upgrade and downgrade, because electricity is something that has a lot of factors involved. You can have 20 amps today, you installed an air conditioning unit for the summer, and all of a sudden it doesn't hold, then you have to upgrade to 30 amps. So you can do that resourcing up and down.
Okay. And just one more question that's related to that. I don't know if you know the answer to this, Fernando. Can Portuguese power be stepped down to accommodate United States power? I imagine this is, I know a lot of people bring appliances over from the US. They're used to a different amount of power to run them. When they plug them into a European plug, they can easily get fried. Do you know if that can be done through the electricity company?
Normally, no, that you have to get your electrician to do it. I know there's some transformers you can plug in. I remember when I was in Canada, from someone's running from 110 volts, 110 volts to 220 volts. Here, for example, there are transformers that I would ask an electrician if you want to make sure you're not burning out your appliances. I mean, from my experience, when you speak of appliances and all that, I think that it's still, for me personally, I find that, in my opinion, it's a benefit probably if you buy the appliances here. It could be a bit more expensive here, but then I've seen people bring things in containers, and you bring an appliance over. And let's be practical. You bring a brand new fridge from America, Canada, overseas from Australia. You bring it over here. All of a sudden, there's an issue where the appliance stops working. How are you going to get guaranteed to work on that? The warranty will certainly not, someone in North America will not insure it or will not repair it. Where if you buy a local appliance, it'll be easier. The correct voltage, I think it makes sense. There could be a difference in cost, yes. I assume there will certainly be different costs from an appliance on a North American market and an appliance on a European market. Same applies to mobile phones, a cell phone, but at least you have a warranty here. I had a poor lady the other day. She bought a brand new iPhone from America, for example, and she paid, I think, 1,300 US dollars. She had an issue with it here. She couldn't get any warranty for it. And then she had to go and buy another one here. So if you're going to and I see this common mistake a lot of times. I'm moving into Portugal soon. I'm here in America. I'm going to buy a brand new cell phone. It's a little bit cheaper than $200 or $300 cheaper than in Portugal. Then if you have an issue here, iPhone here, for example, or a shop here will probably not be able to repair it because your warranty is back from America, from Canada. So I think buy your appliances here if you're in a position to do that. It'll make sense in terms of warranty coverage. And the European law, as of last year, forces any appliance bought in Portugal, a cell phone, a refrigerator, an oven, it has to have 3 years of warranty by law. So I think you're pretty much well buying it here, or a TV set, for example.
I think that's very good advice. So moving on to the next thing, there are more questions on electricity, but I do want to make sure that we cover water as
Sure.
well. Let's talk a little bit about that and how that differs to electricity and gas.
There. Water, this is a service, water contracts. I've started recently, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, about 4 or 5 months ago. I started doing it. I had a lot of people almost inquiring about water, and I wouldn't be able to assist. I will be honest, water contract is the only service I do where I charge a small fee, because I'll explain and people will easily understand it. We do not, as salesmen, we do not get a sales commission off the water company. So therefore, I have to charge for my time in doing it. It's a common practice among a lot of relocation companies working here on the market, lawyers. It's a common practice there. I charge, I think, a very affordable fee. Then I can tell you when you get in touch, and I think it's worth it. It is, in the water market is something very straightforward, a bit different from the internet and gas market and the internet market. The water is only exclusively supplied by one company per location per city. Normally, in the past, for example, if you were in Lisbon or in Porto, that used to be a city-owned company that would supply water. Now, in the last 10, 12 years, those companies have now, those city halls, they have sold all the water management onto these companies who run it. So, but when you do water, there's only one company to contact, and it's very straightforward. You supply a previous water bill, again, if the previous owner or tenant has it, and here it's mandatory. You have to send a picture of the water meter, because electricity meters, they are now becoming intelligent electricity meters, where they can tell the electricity company what's your current consumption or how much electricity you've consumed. With water, that does not happen. So you need to take a picture so that when I do the contract, I can tell the water company, currently the water meter reads, for example, 200 cubic meters of water. And then you're going to pay that water from that day on, not you being overcharged from water that was spent from the previous tenant, but wasn't properly connected, wasn't properly communicated to the water company. So water company, you provide the bill, all the details as normal, proof of address, all those details we had done a list about, and then I do the contract. Normally, some water companies charge you a small admin fee. You have to pay directly, if let's say around 20 euros. Not all of them, some of them do, to change the contract to your name. But then once it's changed, it's done. Then when you leave the apartment, you simply turn it off. For very simple with the water company. And then if for any reason the water meter isn't there, then that'll take probably another week for the water company to come in and put the water meter in. But water is very basic. Again, it was a service I had the need to create because a lot of people were asking, and I thought, well, if it's not me doing it, it's not about the business, about winning or losing business. People are going to be going to probably another company to try and sort it out, or go on their own to do it at the water company office, which if you're in another country, it's not easy to do. They might not speak the perfect English. So I thought, well, it's a service I'm obliged to have to offer clients, because it's kind of like, as some clients say, I'm a one shop for all services, where I can help you get internet connected, electricity, and water. So I decided, no, I have to take a step forward and start offering this service, because it makes sense. If I have all the documents in hand, then I can offer this. And when we're speaking of documents, and a lot of people become afraid, Fernando, I'm sending you very sensitive information, my passport, my IBAN, is it protected? Yes, I'm obliged by law. All information sent to me is only exclusively used for the utility companies. I do not sell anyone's information to anyone else. I do not create databases to sell. It is illegal. European law states it very well. As salesmen or as the utility companies, that information can only be used for them. A lot of people, especially people come from North America, are afraid, oh, well, is it going to be like back home where I'm being every day bombed with calls? No, that is not a common practice here. The actual utility company might contact you to give an offer they might have, but now all of a sudden going to start being someone trying to sell you mortgages because your database was sold to a bank. That does not happen. So all your information is always protected. People can send me that information either via WhatsApp or email. When you put the inquiry through and then James forwards it to me, I'll reply with all my contacts and my website. Then obviously from there, your information is protected, and then you can either do it by WhatsApp or email. It is safe both ways. I do not lose clients' emails. It is all safely backed up. It's all protected. So you can feel free to send the information. And as I tell some clients who are really overstressed, well, what if you do fraud? There's no problem. If I ever do any fraud with the information, you're going to have my details. You're going to have my address. I'll be more than happy to send you my Portuguese citizen card. You can call the national police and simply kill me on
Yeah.
Facebook for what the fraud I did. So I take work seriously. Obviously, as I say, today's clients I've already acquired. I need to think of the future. So I'm here to do serious work, and you're in good hands.
Okay. So let's see what question we
Sure.
have next from people. In relation to obviously you have one option for one water company, unlike
Exactly.
electricity, where you could choose from several. Do you know if the costs are the same all across Portugal? Does water cost the same in
No,
Lisbon as it does
no.
in the Algarve, for
For
example?
example, in the Algarve is one of the highest paid regions for water,
Okay.
shortage of water, it's normal. And for example, if you go inland, normally the water bill is lower. It's normal. In lower density populated areas, the water is cheaper. Obviously, probably areas that don't have as many residents, it'll be cheaper. Um, I'm just walking. Someone asking here, is water drinkable here? You'll find water here. I
Yes.
drink it from the tap. It's very good quality here. Yeah, probably not the same in other countries, but water here is drinkable. It's good. You can buy bottled water, but if you drink water from the tap, you'll be good quality. So yes, there are difference of costs. For example, my average bill, I live myself in central Portugal. I live near a city called Tomar, which is basically between Lisbon and Porto. I'm very close to Coimbra. I pay an average bill of around 20 euros, 16 to 20 euros. And I have here at my house, it's me and my wife, two people, we spend around 5 cubic meters of water, which for those who doesn't know, that relates to 5,000 liters of water per month, and that costs me around 18, 19 euros. That's what I pay. Probably down in the Algarve, you'll probably pay double. You might pay double, but still nothing like you're not going to be paying 200 euros of water per month, unless you have a swimming pool, and then you might have some restrictions from City Hall as to how you can fill your swimming pool up. But for the average household usage, let's say 20, 30 euros, 40 euros if you're spending a lot of water, but nothing major.
Okay, that's good to know. And I don't know if you know about swimming pools, because that is an interesting topic. Whether you would need, obviously, you need permission to get one built and installed. Does it cost the same to fill a swimming pool as it, would you pay the same rates
No.
for your house water
when
as your swimming
when
pool?
you do a water contract, you have a price per cubic meter, which for every
Okay,
1,000 liters of water you spent, you have a price, let's say, normally from 1 cubic meter all the way up to, for example, 5 or 6 cubic meters, which is the average usage on a household. Five, six
okay,
thousand liters of water, you pay a lower price. As you spend more and more money, more and more water, sorry, obviously the price goes up. And then if you're in an area where there is a little bit more shortage of water, City Hall can say, no, wait a second, you're spending too much water for the swimming pool. So for the swimming pool, double check with your City Hall first if you can fill it up,
hmm,
or fill it up over a few days. But probably you might be easier trying to find a local company that delivers water, or the firemen, the bomberos. Sometimes, if you're not in the middle of the of the summer season with some fires, they will be able to supply the water probably at a little bit of a cheaper rate, where they come in with the big truck and they unload that water to fill the swimming pool in.
okay. Well, that is all really, really helpful to know. I think, is there anything else you want to say with regards to water, Fernando?
No, I think it's pretty much straightforward, because you have only one water company available. We change it to
Hmm.
your name, and it's stored up there.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to go through a couple of the questions that have
Sure,
been asked before and after. So they will go across all sort of internet, electricity, and
sure.
water. Um, and so one person is saying that they have a property that's going to be vacant about a month. Normally they would have tenants. They're going to have 1 month where they're going to be in it. Is it easy to get electricity just for a month? for them in their own name and then have it switched to a new tenant.
Yes, you can have that. You can do the contract and then switch it over to the tenant. Normally, it's common practice in Portugal where the landlords, the owners of the property, they always put the utility bill in the tenant's name, the people who rent. I think it's a question of being fair. I think that better than them trying to, let's say, pass it to the tenant's name and then and then the tenant may spend a lot of electricity or a little bit of electricity. So the most fair way to do it is put it in your name. When a tenant comes in, he has a rental contract, a lease, which allows him to legally pass the contract onto his name.
Okay. Um, Cesare is asking, is if we're not going to cover gas in this webinar, does that come under electricity and gas? I think you touched on it
Yes.
a little bit.
Electricity and gas are normally coming under the same bill. When we say gas, piped gas, obviously
Hmm.
in a city or in an area where there is underground pipe gas supplying the house, then you also connect to the gas at the same time you connect to electricity. The gas connection has its own code. It's all done under one contract and then it's sorted. If you're in an area like I am, for example, I don't have a gas pipe here in my area, it's a rural area. I buy bottles of gas there. But when you do have piped gas, yes, you do the contract and it's supplied straight away.
Okay. And we've obviously been talking a lot with relation to mainland Portugal, but that's where you live. Do your services extend to
Excuse me.
Madeira and the Azores as well? And are things like piped gas available there too?
Yes, in Madeira, I deal in terms of internet, I deal across mainland Portugal and the islands.
Okay.
Electricity on the islands, we're not allowed to the contracts there. There you have to contact the local suppliers. With water, I can also, it's a paid service. People are paying me that I can set it up on the islands or here in mainland Portugal.
Okay, perfect. Now, I know we talked about internet and the typical contract is around 2 years. If someone was only going to be in Portugal for a couple of months, is there any kind of month to month option there?
On fiber, no. You have to
Okay.
get a pay-as-you-go 4G data SIM card there. That's what it's a question of what you need to. I've had people who say I'm going to be here for 7 months or a year, but I'll still want to get fiber connected, even having to pay the penalty, which is around 30% of what is left to pay on the contract. That information always comes on the bill because they say, Fernando, 4G is not strong enough for me. I want to have 500 or 1,000 megabytes or 200, so I'll still do the contract. That's in the person's hands to decide what they have to do or what's easier for them or what they want to do at the end of the day.
Okay, that is really good to know. I think there are a lot of people who do come out for a couple of months. And we did mention that the 4G and 5G coverage can be quite good. It's not as good as fiber, and I guess that's just something you have to accept if you're not in a position to sign up for a contract.
I think some questions were asked about how's it with 4G. Imagine you're in an area
Hmm.
where you have no fiber. How does that work? I tell you by email, there's no fiber available. And then the operators do have a 4G solution where the average speed is between 10 to 15 megabytes. Even though on the contract it states up to 40 megabytes, it's me trying to be honest up front and saying, no, you're going to get an average of 10 to 15 megabytes. Any connection below 10 megabytes, the operator probably won't even install. But before I do a contract for 4G satellite internet, what I tell people is get a pay-as-you-go 4G data SIM card and do the test yourself. And whatever speed you get on a 4G data SIM card, it's going to be the same speed on a home 4G contract because they put that same data SIM card in a better router. If needed, an external router antenna to get a better signal. But that's the speed you're going to get realistically. I don't like to jump into a 4G data SIM card on a property with no fiber coverage before you're doing the test yourself.
Okay, that's really, really good advice. Um, let's see what else we have. So there are a couple of, or there is at least one question about bringing a mobile phone contract from the US or another country. And I think we discussed this in the last webinar that basically it's impossible for you to know what someone's roaming would be like if they bought their SIM card from the US. So a company might have good rates, or but generally, I think your advice is always to get a local SIM card.
Local, because we have two different sides of this story. One side is obviously the cost. The cost, you have to see what your carrier charges you originally from back home. From what clients have told me is that normally could charge a little bit in roaming per day. I think European carriers don't charge a lot. For example, North American can charge you a little bit more. So it's a question of you balancing it out. But then the issue is If you have, let's suppose, a foreign number and a Portuguese person, a delivery company, the bank tries to call you, they're going to pay way more money for that call. They're going to avoid calling you. So it's more practical to get a local number. So one thing is the cost. You have to see how much your operator charges you and compare to how much the operator charges you here to have a local SIM card. And then something else is the coverage. Again, it goes kind of like comparing to the low cost companies on the market. A lot of the international carriers, when they come here in roaming, they're going to try and negotiate the cheapest possible roaming cost they pay internally to the Portuguese operators. And then you could see yourself, and I've seen this before, where your foreign carrier has a really bad reception, but if I give you a Portuguese SIM card, it works fine. That's a clear sign that the foreign company is paying very little for the roaming internally to the partner here, and they just give them a little bit of speed just to have the service on, but it's not sufficient. So I still have the same advice: get a local SIM card. Okay, if you don't need to get unlimited data SIM card, for example, you can just get 10 gigabytes, but at least get some calls locally, more practical. Everyone can communicate with you, and it makes sense. In general, people realize it's cheaper to run a local SIM card than paying international roaming to carry it from another country.
Okay. And a question just about phones. Kent has already got a iPhone 14. Is that likely to be good enough in Portugal, or should they consider getting a new one?
iPhones are good. Obviously, each brand they have their own. You have to see the technical specs of each phone if it's enough for you. What you have to ask, very important and clearly, your operator back home. If you bought a phone that's unlocked, it's perfect. That unlocked not only to your home country but to a European number. I've seen this before. Operators, for example, in North America, saying yes, your phone is unlocked. They arrive here, it will not accept European cards. You can have the same iPhone 14 which has one European model version sold and one North American version sold. So you have to be careful that it's unlocked. And then on that perspective, it goes back to what I said. If you're going to buy a new phone to move over, my opinion, probably buy a phone here. Could be a small difference in price, but if you're stuck with warranty and you're paying for something brand new, might as well pay it here. But yes, your iPhone will work perfectly here. It'll be sufficient as long as it's unlocked. But make sure they truly unlock it to, let's suppose, North American carriers and European carriers. Ask that directly. Will it accept a European carrier?
Okay, that is really, really useful to know. And I going back to what you said about roaming and different companies paying different rates. I've used roaming in Portugal, and I've noticed that with I have two SIM cards in my phone. One will be better than the other depending on which network they're partnered with. It's very interesting that that you can have two different qualities of signal coming through.
Yes. Many people use a dual SIM phone. I have it. I have my main number. I have another number I use for installations and work purposes. So I have two numbers. I have a dual SIM. It works perfectly. Question of going around the settings of the phone, telling the phone which one is for the main number for calls, which one is for the data. Make sure you work that out. Also say that, especially people coming from North America, is that in North America, people are used to sending pictures via normal text messages. That in Portugal is not free. You pay for that. So in Portugal, if you want to send a picture, a multimedia, a music file, send it via email, WhatsApp, social media. Do not send it as a normal message, or else you will be charged.
Okay, that's a very, very good point. And one thing I have noticed with people moving from the US is that they are more used to sending standard text messages and, like you say, the
Me too.
video ones. Whereas typically in Portugal, I think pretty much everybody seems to use WhatsApp now as their communication.
It's true. So people come to North America, well, and I say it's very amazing that here in Portugal you also they use the I had a client saying the expression you're addicted to WhatsApp. It's not a question, let's say, being addicted. It's a question here that it's very practical to use. I think from what people tell me, not that much safety issues as is back home with the WhatsApp and being connected to a big social media group, but it's very practical to use here. Someone was asking, can I keep my US number as a WhatsApp? Yes, if your operator allows you to keep the number, many people use it where they get a Portuguese line and they use WhatsApp for their American number. That's perfectly fine. It's a WhatsApp. A Portuguese number can WhatsApp you without any issues. There's no extra cost. It works off WhatsApp and any internet-based apps, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, those are all internet-based costs. So as long as you have unlimited internet at home, fiber, or if you have unlimited data plan or enough data, there's no extra cost running those apps on internet. It's off your internet. There's no cost on the operator to run those apps.
Okay, that is very, very helpful. Jumping back to gas, there's a one person saying they had to pay for a gas inspection when they moved in. Is that the norm?
When you have piped gas installed at home and the company and you have an inspection which is normally valid for 2, 3, or 4 years depending on the inspection. If that inspection has expired, yes, you have to get that
Okay.
inspection done. When we do the contract, we can have the gas company do that inspection, or you get your private company to do it. Normally, your private technician, it's easier to simply get the gas company to order that. But yes, they have to invoice this inspection to make sure it's safe. Electricity, pretty standard. Gas, if you have a leaking pipe, they have to test all the appliances, the ovens. So that's a normal procedure. You have to pay someone to do that test to make sure the gas is safe.
Okay. Um, two questions then about internet. First of all, one question on whether the router that's given by one of the three companies can be improved.
No, but here it's different from other countries where the router they give you is the router you have to work with.
Okay.
I said, easier if you subscribe 500 megabytes or more because it's a Wi-Fi 6 router, which is currently the best routers on the market, Wi-Fi 6. Then what you can do is bring your own router connected to the operator's router. You cannot get the operator to connect to your own router directly. No, they have to connect it to their router and then you can
Okay.
connect it to theirs. Something else people ask tons of questions about is the VPNs, virtual private networks, so you can keep your Netflix from another country working here. Again, I'm not a technician, not that specialist, but what is a VPN very briefly? It's a device that will basically block any company to know where you are located currently. If you're using your Netflix in Portugal, or if it will look like you're still using it back in your home country. Those VPNs you have to get them yourselves. Um, be aware, and I've seen this before, some headaches where people get VPNs and then the internet is slow. They're complaining because the internet is very slow, and they reach the conclusion where the VPN is blocking the speed. So make sure you speak with someone who has done it before, someone who is here or has given you experience, or an IT specialist who can say this is the best VPN that will obviously look like you're still using your internet back home, but will not block the speed. In terms of technology inside, it can happen a lot that VPN can cut off the speed. So careful with that.
Oh, okay. And another question just on internet speed there. So this person trades online in the financial markets with 3 to 4 laptops.
Yep.
Do you think they would need the 8 gig speed? And this is, I guess, this difficult question, but you're suggesting no.
I still think 1,000 megabytes download,
Yeah.
400 upload will be fine. What do I recommend for that person? Make sure you get a cable connected from the router to each of the laptops, because that way you're gonna have, let's suppose you're gonna have the 1,000 megabyte download being supplied to the 4 computers at the same time, meaning each of them get 250 megabytes. Then if you see you need more than that, you have to see what you're using currently, then go to the 8 gigabytes, because the 8 gigabyte connection has a bit of an issue. When we do the contract, it'll normally take 2 to 3 or even 1 month for the operator to be prepared to install that. So it could take a little bit more. And again, I emphasize this. If you don't have the most recent computer with the best processor on the market, you will not get the 8 gigabyte download speed. And there will be a frustrated client saying, I'm paying for 8 gigabytes. I can only get the normal 1 gigabyte. So I'm being ripped off. Not really. They alert this. Make sure you have the correct equipments, the right computers to guarantee you can receive. So if you're going to subscribe to it, make sure that you on your computer specs, or when you go to buy the computer, ask the shop, will this computer be able to get 8 gigabytes of speed? And then if it can, then buy it. If not, the standard 1,000 download, 400 upload will be enough. I mean, you see what you're using back home. If that person is trading online, already has 4 computers connected in another country, and if they had whatever speed they had, if it was 1,000 megabytes, it'll be sufficient here.
Okay. And definitely, I think 8 gigabytes seems to be very, very fast. I think the norm in most of the rest of the Europe still seems to be about 1 gigabyte. I was quite
or
surprised to see that.
less, or
Yeah.
less. I mean, this 8 gigabyte plan until December was only exclusively sold to companies, clients that were companies basically. And then they start to see there because a lot of people working from home, independent workers like me, people working online, where they start to need quite some heavy uploads and downloads. So they made it offer for made this plan offer to the domestic market, but for all the years they only supplied this to companies because normally a domestic client you really have to have really, really specific needs to be able to need to have this 8 gigabytes download and upload. And not all areas have this. I put that on my emails. We have to check. Normally, the major cities have the 8 gigabyte speed available, yes, but if you're in a rural area, there could be fiber. They can supply 1,000 download, 400 upload, and they won't be able to give you 8 gigabytes because the infrastructure is not updated yet. So that's very common. And then if you're in a rush to have it installed, it could take 3 weeks to have that 8 gigabytes plan prepared to install. So in that case, what I recommend do the 1,000 megabyte 400 upload, and then if you test it first, always test before you're going straight into the 8 gigabyte. Follow my advice. Do the 1,000 download, 400 upload. Test it for 1, 2, 3 weeks. If you see that's still not good, then we ask for the upgrade. No point in because once you've signed for the 8 gigabyte, you cannot downgrade that contract. So do it the other way around. Try the 1,000 and then upgrade to 8 gigabytes if really, really needed.
Okay, that seems very practical advice. So one final question for you, Fernando, and this is, I'm not sure if this applies to electricity and gas or internet, but it's if access into the property is needed and this person is in the country, how will the engineer get access to the property for installation? Is that something you're able to answer? I guess in terms of practical needs, you would need to have someone else with the key. I assume the outside company isn't going to have that.
It was a good question. Something I was forgetting to mention to speak a little bit about. Obviously, you don't need to be here. Your
Hmm.
landlord, your estate agent, anyone can open the door and install it. So that they open the
Okay.
door, they install it, and then try and see which is the best location for the router. Where can the fiber cable come in and connect the router to the modem? Personally, I still have the same opinion that you should always try and be yourself installing because you get your landlord in, the estate agent who's probably not that tech savvy, doesn't exactly know your needs, and could put the router in the wrong position. You arrive,
Okay.
the router's not really good in the
Hmm.
probably here. The living room needs to probably be in that office space there. And then once installation is done, you can change the router to a different room within the house, but then the operator will charge you 50 euros to send a technician, disconnect the router, run the cable again to a new permanent connection to where you want the router placed in. So I think you should always try and be yourself here for the installation. We have the flexibility of you being able to book the date you're here. So I mean, if you arrive today, we can book it for the same day. I always recommend people probably don't book installation for the day you arrive. If you're coming from far away, jet lag, and my experience with flying over a few years, you're going to be really tired without brains in the position to be able to think where you want things. Probably arrive. If you really depend on internet at the airport, get a 4G pay as you go data SIM card to get you through 1 or 2 days, and then do the installation after 1 or 2 days. Also state that when we do a contract on the current month, it has to be installed until the following month, let's suppose day 20 or day 21, to not lose that offer. For example, if you're coming in 6 months, I cannot do the contract yet. It has to be installed the following month. So then when I give you the prices are the prices for the current month, and then someone disappears and then comes back to me in 4 months, the price could go up. Normally, there's only a raise at the beginning of the year, but you can plan ahead, ask me if there's fiber, and I'll give you the current prices. But I cannot do you a contract for 2 or 3 months ahead. It has to be installed on the following month of when we signed the contract. And now that we're speaking of contracts, people say, well, Fernando, I'm signing now. I'm only arriving next month. Is it safe? Yes, it is safe. You signed the contract, allows me to book a technician in for the installation. If the internet is not installed because of a physical difficulty where it's not possible to install fiber in the house, or plans changed and you're not coming over to Portugal anymore because of life changes, we know how it is, there's no problem. You only start paying your contract once it's physically installed and successfully. If it's not installed, nothing is charged. So do not be afraid to sign a contract today, which you're going to install in 2 to 3 weeks. There's no problem. Or I'm only going to sign the lease next month, or the actual sales, you purchasing the property next month. Still plan ahead. Try to do it with as much time as you can. Could be a few days where I'm a little bit more busy or someone isn't as responsive. It's always good. Try and plan ahead as much as you want, or as much as you can, let's say.
Okay. Well, Fernando, I think That is the end of all the questions. We have got through very, very many of them here. I know at least 34 it says on the Zoom app, and there was plenty from before and more in the chat. So I really appreciate you covering all these topics in depth. I think it's been very, very useful information for anyone, and I can see quite a few people saying thank you and discussing how to get in touch with you. So very, very much appreciated, Fernando.
Yes, just to someone was just sending a message here. If I get fiber, do I have to buy a new computer? No. Try your computer first, see if it works well, or your phone, and then purchase a new one if that is not sufficient. Just to say as a final note, as we're speaking, I've received already some inquiries of people here on the webinar. I'd ask for a little bit of patience in the sense that I will probably be overwhelmed with a few inquiries today. I will try and reply within the next 2 to 3 days. On average, I reply to an average of 30 to 40 emails per day, 15 WhatsApp messages, another 40 phone calls. So I'm always busy, but I will reply back. No one is forgotten. But my previous experience on the webinar I did with James last year, the same thing happened. During the 2 days, I was overwhelmed with literally, I think on that we did, I got around 27 inquiries off the webinars. Don't feel shy. Please ask. There are never ridiculous questions, only ridiculous answers. I will come back to you as soon as I can. I just ask for a little bit of patience in the sense that if I do not reply today, I am not ignoring you. I have other things going on too, other services I offer, and you'll get to know me a little bit about it. So I will come back to you as soon as possible. Even over the weekend, I almost work every day. But still, I will be here to reply to you. Just a little bit of patience if I don't reply within the same day.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Fernando. And I know you always reply to people, and I really, really appreciate that. So many people saying thank you in the comments for this. I think it's very, very useful information, and something that people, like we said, is things like internet. It's something we absolutely, really, really need to have, and so you will make people's lives a lot easier in terms of getting set up.
There's, as I said, no need to thank. Polite on everyone saying thank you. This is my job. I'm always available for webinars on my services. James knows there's a question of booking it in on the day that's good for me and for him, or whoever needs the webinar off me. I think that as part of my job, it's good. It's a way of me getting people to know my services. It's
Mhm.
always a pleasure speaking a little bit about it. I think when you work and you do something you enjoy, it's not work. It's a bit of fun, as we say. So it's something I like to speak about, informing people. Don't forget, I was an expat myself. I came from Canada. I know exactly where you're coming from, which shoes you're in. You're kind of like going at like 100 miles an hour, heading towards a concrete wall. You don't know where you're going into. So it's normal you have questions, doubts, different questions. So it's always a pleasure helping you and taking the most sensible choices. And don't feel shy to ask. Ask any questions. Email me. I'll get back to you. I'm always easygoing with clients. I will reply, and it's always a pleasure to have these webinars. I think we all learn a little bit about each other. And as I saw as the comments were passing here, some people helping each other and replying. This is what webinars are about. Asking the questions to me, and then some questions are very more basic questions to some which you can easily help each other. And this is all about a learning journey, about learning along the way and the journey. And we learn how to adapt ourselves here. And if you're about to take that last leap, should I move to Portugal? This will probably give you a little bit of a relief, take that bit of stress off. You're not going to the end of the world here. A lovely country. You can live here perfectly. You can work here. So I think if we can help each other come over here, it's always good. Feel free to speak to me in English. If Portuguese learning at a restaurant, I prefer speaking English back to you because business-wise it's easier. And I think that people will feel very welcoming in Portugal because you're bringing business into our country and we depend of you. So feel free to come over. It's a pleasure having all of you here in Portugal, and ask whatever you need to. If I know the answer, I will give it to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that,
Thanks,
Fernando.
James.
That's fantastic.
And hope to see you soon one of these days on a new webinar. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining. See you next time.
Thanks. Take care. Bye. Have a good evening.